We'll call the meeting to order. This is the Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration, meeting number 74. It's Tuesday, March 26th, 2013. We are studying Mr. Shory's private member's bill, which is Bill C-425, an act to amend the Citizenship Act honoring the Canadian Armed Forces. We have quite a few guests here this morning. We have from the Muslim Canadian Congress, we have two representatives, Salma Siddiqui.
Thank you.
Good morning to you. You're the president.
Yes, morning.
Yes. And Tahir Goria, who is the Secretary General.
Good morning. Thank
and you know, I'm going to mess up all the pronunciations, and you'll just have to, live with me. That's all. Good morning to both of you.
Thank you.
We have Professor Grazia Scorpio from Queens.
RMC, sir.
I didn't hear. The Royal Military College. There it is, right there. Canadian Defence Academy, the Royal Military College of Canada, Department of National Defence. And good morning to you, Professor.
Thank you.
And finally, we have Ahmadiyya, Muslim Jamaat.
Butchering these, eh?
Was that close?
Ahmadiyya.
Ahmed. Asif Khan, the National Secretary for Public Relations. Imtiaz Ahmad, the Missionary and Public Relations Director of the Ottawa region. Good morning to you, gentlemen.
Good morning.
So each group will have up to 10 minutes to make a presentation. We will start with you, Mr. Khan.
Good morning. Honourable Chair, Members of Parliament, colleagues and special guests, I'm honoured to be with you today to discuss Private Member's Bill C-425, an act to amend the Citizenship Act honouring the Canadian Armed Forces. My name is Asif Khan, as mentioned, and I'm the National Secretary of Public Relations for the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat. Today I will speak to the importance and validity of Bill C-425 from the perspective of an Ahmadi Muslim. I'm an Ahmadi Muslim who has lived his entire life as a proud Canadian and a devoted Muslim himself. First and foremost, I can tell you that Islam is categorical and explicit in teaching Muslims that loyalty to one's country of residence, the land that provides for a person's livelihood and fosters their hopes and dreams, is an important tenet of faith. The Prophet of Islam, Muhammad, peace be upon him, himself once stated, "Love for one's homeland is part of one's faith." And so it is on the precept of this guidance from the founder of Islam himself that Ahmadi Muslims have such deep regard for the country we live in. Further to this, His Holiness Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, the current worldwide spiritual head of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat, has further elaborated on this noble precept by guiding Ahmadi Muslims all over the world with the following words. He says, and I quote, as citizens of any country, we Ahmadi Muslims will always show absolute love and loyalty to the state. Every Ahmadi Muslim has a desire for his chosen country to excel and should always endeavor towards this objective. And about Canada in particular, His Holiness echoed the sentiments of all Canadian Ahmadi Muslims during his recent tour of Canada this past summer, when he stated, "I say without hesitation that the water and earth of Canada certainly contains high moral values and loyalty." He also repeated a prayer from our fourth Caliph that, and I quote, "The whole world becomes like Canada, and Canada becomes the whole world." Despite the 200 countries that Ahmadis are now living in, serving and building communities wherever they go, the Canadian government is at the forefront in helping Ahmadis become a key part of the fabric that weaves this country together. Whether it's Prime Minister Harper attending the opening of our mosque in Calgary, the largest in Canada, or the government's decision to announce the Office of Religious Freedom at our headquarters in Vaughan, we have felt the embrace of our nation in our home, which is Canada. And this serves as a heartbreaking reminder and joy for us, because many Ahmadi Muslims have migrated to Canada, fleeing from bitter persecution in Pakistan. Ahmadis there are legislatively sanctioned with actual amendments to the Pakistan Constitution, declaring us non-Muslims and setting harsh penalties of imprisonment and even death merely for practicing our faith. So Canada has been a haven for Ahmadi Muslims, making our love for this country all the more stronger. This is why we are at the forefront in giving back to our country and serving our communities. We are one of the largest partners for the Canadian Blood Services. We raise over 100,000 pounds of food for the less fortunate here each year. We hold community cleanups across Canada. We hold hospital fundraisers and have earned the respect and appreciation of the leaders and public figures of every community we reside in. But our love for this country goes far beyond this, and it is this love that demands us Ahmadi Muslims to uphold the sanctity of Canadian citizenship to the utmost. Canadian citizenship is a great blessing and a gift whose importance and purity must be protected and preserved. That is why it is crucial that the Canadian government should possess the power to strip Canadian citizenship from all such dual citizens who are convicted and confirmed in committing acts of war against the Canadian Armed Forces. If our government does not possess this right, then how can we deter such would-be transgressors against the state from committing acts that threaten the security of this country? It is only just that those who undermine the value of their Canadian citizenship enough to wage war against the state should also thereby forfeit their right to that very citizenship. A citizenship that so many countless millions are in search of, yet so disregarded by such troublemakers. But this bill is more than about those who commit war against the state. Ultimately, this bill leads to granting the government the right to strip citizenship from any dual citizens who are convicted of terrorism. To this point, His Holiness Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmed, the worldwide leader of the Ahmadi Muslim Jamaat, spoke this past summer even before the motioning of this bill. He says, and I quote, "Indeed, for the entire world to become Canada, we must keep a vigilant eye on all forms of extremism and extremists." And in so doing, His Holiness recognized, even led the way, in informing Canadians about the need to protect from the threat of extremism. But why should we only worry about such problems after the fact? Extremism must be rooted out before it even festers in the first place. It should never happen to begin with. Regarding this, His Holiness advised the government in the same address with the following words. He says, and again I quote, "I would like to draw your attention towards one matter in particular. The government should be aware that it is quite possible for certain extremist elements to enter the country on the pretext of benefiting from the various investment opportunities or schemes of the government. This risk should be kept in view by the policymakers when determining future immigration and investment policies." He goes on to say, "No doubt the eyes and glances of those who hold extremist ideologies are cast upon this country. It is not necessary that they will conduct a large-scale terrorist attack, but instead they may take a more subtle approach, whereby they will seek to gradually spread their hate-filled ideologies upon entering the country. Certainly, one common and relatively easy way of entering the country is on the pretext of business, trade, and investment. Now, it could be argued that the various changes to the immigration processes have made immigration to Canada more difficult, and it would appear odd that an ethnic and religious community would support such changes and possibly more in the future. However, the Ahmadiyya Muslim community is utterly against all forms of terrorism and extremism and supports any policy that protects the principle of loyalty to Canada wholeheartedly. We realize that it would perhaps make immigration applications more stringent for acceptance to Canada for members of our community and others. However, Canada must protect the reputation and the generosity that this great country affords to those that get to call it their home. Our utmost priority is the safety and progress of Canada, even if it means that members of our own community find it difficult to immigrate here. In closing, I return to the proposed Bill C-425 and end this endorsement to protect the sanctity of Canadian citizenship with some humble words of caution. I can tell you that more than anything, along with our values of tolerance and plurality, Canada is defined by its qualities of justice, fairness, and due process. So in empowering the state to strip citizenship from dual citizens who commit acts of war and potentially acts of terror against Canada, the Government of Canada must ensure that individuals are not even accused, let alone convicted of such acts lightly. The bill and its accompanying rules should be carefully drafted. It would be tragic and not to the intent of the bill if an innocent citizen was to suffer due to a hurried decision or an improper investigation. How these measures are set up, I leave to the able-minded policymakers of our government. Our final advice would be that due process, full investigation, and the highest standards of fairness, care, and consideration are exhibited in exercising a power that allows for the removal of this most precious and sacred gift we call citizenship. So long live Canada, and thank you for your time.
Well, thank you, Mr. Khan. We thank you for your kind words of Canada. We certainly appreciate your remarks. Our second witness is Professor Scapio, Associate Professor at the Royal Military College. Good morning to you, and you have up to 10 minutes.
Okay, sir. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me. I'm an associate professor at the Canadian Defence Academy and the Royal Military College. I've been asked to appear as an individual based on my expertise, and I will be speaking on my behalf and not on behalf of the Department of National Defence. I've conducted research in Canada and elsewhere excuse me, on immigrant integration and organizational diversity, including military organizations and the Canadian Forces. I will focus my comments on the first part of Bill C-425, an act to amend the Citizenship Act, specifically on the subsection which refers to reducing by 1 year the required years of residence in Canada of any permanent resident who is a member of the Canadian Armed Forces, has signed a minimum 3-year contract, and completed basic training. The intended outcome of the above-mentioned amendment is somewhat unclear. If the intent is simply to expedite the citizenship process of a few select immigrants who happen to have unique skills to fulfill a special need of the Canadian Forces, then the bill, if passed, would be accomplishing this outcome and result in a small-scale impact. If, however, the intent is to open the door of the Canadian Forces to greater numbers of qualified landed immigrants with permanent residence in order to provide, and I quote, new Canadians with more pathways to integration, as stated by Mr. Shorey, who presented the bill when he appeared before this committee, then the bill on its own would not accomplish this broader outcome. This proposed amendment to the Citizenship Act will likely impact a very small number of individuals, since the number one advertised requirement to join the Canadian Forces is Canadian citizenship. Only occasionally the Canadian Forces recruit non-citizens. As the committee learned in a previous hearing, only about 60 personnel in the Canadian Forces are non-Canadian citizens with permanent residency status, or about 15 on average yearly. Roughly, this will represent less than 0.5% of the Canadian Forces' yearly planned intake. The policy that establishes Canadian Forces enrollment requirements is found in the Queen's Regulations and Orders, QRNO, Chapter 6, which states that in order to be eligible for enrollment in the Canadian Forces as an officer or non-commissioned member, a person must be a Canadian citizen, except that the Chief of the Defence Staff or such officer as he may designate may authorize the enrollment of a citizen of another country if he is satisfied that a special need exists and that the national interest will not be prejudiced thereby. As illustrated, there are exceptions to the citizenship requirement to join the Canadian Forces. However, these exceptions are few and not widely advertised. As well, it should be noted that there are additional challenges and significant delays to obtain security clearance for any applicant, whether he or she is a Canadian citizen or foreign national, who has resided abroad. I was one of them, so I know. For the great majority of the Canadian Forces occupations, the required security level is Level 2 secret. Therefore, should the actual intent be to open the Canadian Forces recruiting door to qualified immigrant men and women who are permanent residents, the bill on its own will not accomplish this outcome. Rather, relevant policies would have to be amended to allow more newcomers to apply and join the Canadian Forces. These potential policy changes will likely result in increasing the diversity of the Canadian Forces membership, since currently the Canadian Forces do not reflect the cultural, ethnic, and gender diversity of the Canadian society. At the same time, it would be important to consider interrelated issues such as security clearance that I spoke about, official language ability, and foreign credentials, just to name a few. As well, it would be informative to review the policies and processes in place in other militaries that recruit non-citizens, such as the United States of America and more recently Australia. In conclusion, I am in favor to the subsection of the bill regarding expediting citizenship requirements of permanent residents who are members of the Canadian Armed Forces. this would be a positive step. However, as it stands, the impact of this amendment to the Citizenship Act on new immigrants would not be significant, as they are, by and large, not eligible to join the Canadian Forces. If a wider impact is envisioned, other relevant policies would have to be amended accordingly to allow greater numbers of qualified future Canadian citizens to join the Canadian Forces, thus providing them with more pathways to integration. Thank you for this opportunity to provide my perspective.
And thank you, Professor Scapio. We appreciate your comments. Our final witness is from the Muslim Canadian Congress, Ms. Siddiqui. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of Parliament, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here today to speak to you not only as President of Muslim Canadian Congress, but more importantly as a proud Canadian. I would like to take this opportunity to introduce my colleague Tahir Gora, who serves as the Secretary General of the Muslim Canadian Congress, right next to me. Canadians are known around the world as being honest, polite, fair, and as brokers of peace. We wear the maple leaf proudly on our backpacks while traveling, and we heard stories of others sewing the flag on theirs in order to enjoy the same benefits. The benefits that come with being a Canadian. Our global reputation is a great source of pride for all Canadians, but it also comes with great responsibility. I came to this country in 1967, many years ago, from Pakistan. My country of birth was experiencing much hardship. My parents, like any other parents, wanted the best for their children. They brought us to safety and security in this country. What happened next is what makes Canada so great. My experience is the embodiment of immigrant experience. Nothing came easy to us. We worked and worked very hard. With that hard work, doors opened, opportunities came, and it is with great pride that I'm happy to say that we successfully built businesses here. And the same experience for my colleague, Tahir Gora. I know countless others from all the world who have shared the immigrant experience in Canada. We all know too well that in this increasingly globalized, competitive world, we will continue to need immigrants from all stripes to spur our economy, to foster innovation, and to contribute as many countless millions before them in building a strong and more prosperous Canada. Canada's stellar reputation is one in which we can recruit the world's best and brightest. It is for this reason that I am here today. Ladies and gentlemen, our reputation is under attack. Some Canadians who use their very citizenship and passport that come with it to engage in activities that are nothing short of absolutely contradictory to our Canadian values. We have heard stories of Canadians being involved in terrorist activities in different hotspots throughout the world. Some have killed, others have trained or are training with known terrorist groups, and they continue to plot attacks against our interests and those of our allies. Indeed, it is an affront to our men and women in uniform who serve to protect Canadian values around the world that they should have to confront violence perpetuated by opportunistic and disloyal Canadians. Those of us who lived through the 1980s remember well the damage done to Canada's reputation by act of Sikh terrorism. Recent news about Canadian citizens involved in terrorist act in Algeria, Bulgaria, and with Al-Shabaab in Somalia should disturb us all. The flow of young Canadians to terrorist training camps around the world is indeed a matter of concern. We cannot allow this to continue. Canadians who are opposed to the values of our society should not be allowed to abuse the privileges that come with holding Canadian citizenship. We must act to strip Canadian citizenship from those that seek to exploit it for violent and illegal activities. Bill C-425 seeks to strip Canadian citizenship from dual nationals engaged in violent disloyalty to Canada. The Muslim Canadian supports this bill. We remember all too well how frustrating it was for us to be painted by some in the U.S. media as a safe haven for terrorists, as a place where terrorists could come and exploit the very judicial system they seek to destroy for their own means. It is for this reason why we must support this legislation and demonstrate that no one shall be permitted to spill blood under our name. I've heard concerns that Bill C-425 represent a knee-jerk reaction, or that it serves, quote, quote, political process. I disagree. Bill C-425 represent an assertion of pride we hold in our values of an open, liberal democracy where our freedoms are applied to all. Ladies and gentlemen, we must be reasonable. We cannot allow those with violent aspiration who seek to attack us, our interests, and those of our allies to do so while using our flag under the banner which provides them the freedom and mobility to participate in these violent, hateful, and cowardly acts. In closing, I would like to thank you for this opportunity and would ask that you support the passage of Bill C-425. It is an essential step in all of us taking a stand in guard for thee. Thank you very much.
And thank you to all of you for your presentations and comments. They've been very helpful. Members of the committee will now have a series of questions and comments to make to you. On this side is the members of the opposition. On this side is the government. Our first question is from Ms. James.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome to all our guests. It was certainly wonderful to hear your viewpoints on this particular bill. They need their earpieces, I believe.
The earpieces
Thank you.
help us to hear, and also if there's translation, so I'd recommend you wear them.
Could you add some extra seconds to my time,
Oh, I'll
please?
give you seconds.
Thank you. It was refreshing to hear all of the members here today, all the witnesses here, testify similarly in their beliefs. Last year, Citizenship and Immigration actually embarked on revoking citizenship on those who obtained citizenship fraudulently here in Canada through residency fraud. I actually contacted my constituents in Scarborough Centre. I sent out information letting them know and asked for their feedback. Overwhelmingly support of what citizenship holds in this country, but there was this underlying commonality in the responses that I received. I had many, and when I say many, I mean like hundreds of responses come back in, and people were concerned about the fact that people in this country are committing terrorism, involved in training camps and so on, and they retain their citizenship. And there was a request that actually said that we should be revoking citizenship on those that commit acts of terror, plot to destroy what citizenship holds, the true north, strong and free. I mean, we're all proud to be Canadian, and I believe that I heard from both groups here today that you're in agreement to that statement, that someone who plots to destroy Canada, what it means to be Canadian, democracy and freedom, that they should not be able to retain their citizenship if they're dual citizens. Do you agree with that statement?
Correct.
And also the...
Correct.
Thank you. There are critics of this bill, probably some within this committee today, that feel that citizenship is an unalienable right, that once you're able to obtain it, no matter what you do to contradict the oath that you took for citizenship. No matter what you do, you should be able to obtain that, and you should be able to stand behind it and hide behind it. Do you believe that that's true, that it's once you have it, you should have it for life?
I don't know the views of the opposition. In regards to citizenship, if somebody were to get citizenship for Canada and drop their second citizenship, then what you're suggesting doesn't apply.
Correct.
So again, my remarks go back to more of the root of the issue, that let's make sure that we're protecting who we're letting into this country in the first place. And let's have stronger measures set up so as to root out those that could spread hate in this country, not be able to obtain citizenship. So it's a mute fact if somebody wants to be if we were going to strip citizenship from a terrorist anyways.
That's correct, and we cannot leave someone stateless. That's part of what we stand for. So this applies only for people who have obtained citizenship, and it's a dual citizenship situation. In fact, there's been many cases where someone has obtained citizenship and then quite often has left this country, has traveled on a Canadian passport, which I think that you mentioned. Canadian passports allow you to really travel freely in this world because Canadians are known for honesty and goodwill and stance on democracy and freedom. So we've heard from other witnesses in this committee in previous sessions that have testified that they believe that Canadian passports actually allow someone to more freely travel throughout the world and plot and commit acts of terrorism. Would you agree with that statement?
I definitely do agree, and I think that we need to go a little bit beyond the, if I may put it, partisan politics. We should look at what effect it has on the majority of immigrants who have become Canadians, and the fact that, this does have a backlash. And it's a discussion for another time, but definitely anybody who's holding dual citizenship and they just come to use this passport really puts those who are working for Canada, and I believe I'm one of them, and we are here because we are supporting that. Definitely it needs a serious consideration, and it should go.
Thank you. Ms. Sadiqui, you had mentioned some of the terrorist attacks that we've been hearing about recently. There was something in Bulgaria and, of course, Algeria not too long ago, and now there's been confirmation that there's been 2 Canadians involved in that. I'm from the Toronto area, actually Scarborough, and not too long ago I think it was a real eye-opener for people in Canada to learn about the Toronto 18 and the fact that there were training camps here in Ontario, and that many members of that particular group were actually from the Scarborough area. So it was a huge concern for my constituents. But I'm just, you touched base on it. Do you think that radicalization in Canada is a growing problem? Because I have to tell you, 10, 15 years ago, never heard about it.
It is a definite problem, and for anyone to say that this may be a problem, we are living in a dream world. It is a definite problem. I was traveling to Dubai last year, and I saw an imam from the Mississauga area bringing 18 or 19 young people for a retreat. I know very well what the retreat was, and I'm not getting into maybes, but the fact is, yes, it is, and it's a real threat, and we must be looking into it seriously, yes.
Someone who comes here to Canada and seeks to obtain citizenship and then uses that citizenship to travel abroad to commit acts of terrorism, would you consider that they obtain their citizenship fraudulently? I mean, after all, I've been to many ceremonies, and you take an oath and allegiance to Her Majesty and to this country to uphold our laws and values. Would you say that someone who sets out to obtain it so that they can travel freely, that they would be obtaining it in a fraudulent manner?
Absolutely, and I think there have been weaknesses in our system.
And do you feel that by letting people know that when they take that oath that you will be stripped of your citizenship if you commit an act of terror, plot to destroy the very thing that Canadians hold dear, democracy and freedom in this country, do you believe that that will send a clear message that Canada will not tolerate this type of activities in this country or abroad?
This is definitely a very clear message, and we hope that this would resonate and people will understand that there is a responsibility with that. We cannot be politically correct. in everything. And it's not about political correctness, because at the end of the day, the fact that, by being politically correct, we are not doing service to the immigrants who have come here and are working in an honest manner. And I'm not an immigrant. I've been here more than 3/4 of my life. But the fact is, I'm still called an immigrant. And Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Sims.
Thank you very much, and I want to thank all representatives for coming here today and presenting to us and giving us your perspective, or the perspective that your organizations hold on the issue that we are here to discuss. First of all, let me make it very, very clear that we fully support our military, our armed forces, reflecting the diversity of our population. I've been a teacher most of my life, and I have fought for that diversity in all institutions, including the teaching profession, because I think we're better served when all our institutions represent the diversity, so that all our kids, whether they come from Pakistan, their roots are in Pakistan, or whether their roots are in India or China, wherever they are, they see themselves reflected when they see the people who are either teaching them or working in the systems that we have. So we are fully supportive of measures that would facilitate that kind of a diversity. And secondly, let me also make it very clear that we think that having Canadian citizenship is a privilege, especially for those of us who are not born in Canada. I am one of those. I am an immigrant who came to Canada, actually made my husband promise we were only coming for a year. That led to 2 years. That led to me being here since 1975, so a very, very long time. So I consciously chose Canada to be my home and a place where I want to raise my children. And I did that because I looked at the kind of standing that Canada used to have internationally, and I say used to have internationally, and I did that because I saw the kind of cultural milieu that was here, and also the beautiful geography, and I thought, what a wonderful place to raise my children, who were both born here. So now that we've got that aside, and the concerns we have and questions we have with this bill, I don't want them to be taken as partisan shots. These are legitimate concerns where we play our role as the opposition and also as parliamentarians to look at legislation to make sure it serves the intent, and also that it does not go in such a sweeping way that it takes away rights from certain individuals as well, who should not have their rights taken away. So it's with that perspective that I come at this bill, as do my colleagues. So with that in mind, my first question is towards Professor Scopio. And I read your paper, Diversity Best Practices in Military Organization, with great interest. As I said, that's something that's dear to my heart. By the way, I would have been in the armed forces if I had been half an inch taller. But I failed my medical. And this was way back when in a different country, in England. Anyway, in that you discuss recommendations that would help the Canadian Forces shift from its current reactive approach to diversifying its recruits to a more proactive approach. And so in your analysis, is Clause 1 of C425 a reactive or proactive measure towards enhancing diversity in the Canadian Forces? And can you elaborate on how you would see the proactive approaches playing out?
Thank you for the question. Yes, this part of the bill would be proactive. My point was, however, that on its own, it would only achieve a very small impact. The reason is that, by and large, non-citizens, even if they are permanent residents, are not eligible to apply. So if the aim, if the intent, as you spoke to the intent, So if the intent is to open the Canadian Forces recruiting door a little bit wider, then other related policies and processes need to be amended at the same time. But by all means, yes, this is a first baby step, if you will, in a proactive way.
Okay. And, you know, I wasn't here for the testimony last week due to illness, but I have read it, and we heard from members of the Canadian Forces that Clause 1 of this bill would actually apply to a very small number, as you have said, about 15. And so to me, when I look at the diversity of this amazing country and the diversity of our population, and I come from Newton North Delta, which is a very, very diverse community, I worry about this being such a baby step, that this baby step is too tiny, because if we were to look at increments of 15 over the next number of years, how long is it going to take? And I don't think, when we look at reflecting our diversity in our systems, especially in our military, we should wait that long. So I do have that concern. So in your paper, Professor, you also wrote that core Canadian diversity values should be a fundamental component of the framework of Canadian Forces leadership values. Further, you suggest these values and competencies should apply to everyone in the organization, not only to existing majority groups, but also to the new so-called minority groups. In other words, individuals whose values and attitudes are in conflict with those of the organization will be expected to adapt to the organizational context. Can you explain currently how the values or value compliance of a potential recruit might be measured or assessed?
Well, right now, the measure that is very standard is the Canadian Forces aptitude test. It's not really measuring those kinds of values. There are some organizations, for example, there are some police organizations that are starting to look at psychometric measures to ensure that their recruits are, for example, not racist and things of that sort. I don't believe that right now our standard test that we use is measuring those kinds of values that I'm talking about in terms of diversity, so multiculturalism being one of them, and are necessarily a priority that is being measured.
Thank you, Professor. Mr. Lamoureux.
Mr. Chair, this bill, in my opinion, is accomplishing two things. First, I mentioned last week in regards to the establishment of a two-tier citizenship. And now I have a letter that I believe all committee members have, and it's from the Canadian Bar Association, and I want to quote one part of it where it states, "The bill proposes to create two classes of citizens. Dual citizens would risk losing Canadian citizenship in certain unclearly defined circumstances, even if they were born in Canada and have lived their entire lives here. Citizens who do not have another nationality would not risk losing their Canadian citizenship." We're talking about a relatively small number. You could count them on one hand minus your thumb in terms of the number of people that this has affected over the last 50 years. Is it worth establishing a two-tier citizenship? Would it be just as effective to say that if these individuals are found, that there is another way of dealing with them? You could put them in prison, for example, and treat citizens equally. I'm interested in very quick responses from Mr. Khan and Ms. Siddique.
Well, when you say that the number is minuscule or small, what is that number?
Less than 4, 2 or 3 people in the last 50 years.
That are in fear of losing their citizenship as dual citizens?
That if this law was to pass, that it would actually have impacted.
So I'm not sure I understand that comment in the sense that those that are, born, those that are extremists or terrorists tend to have a pride of maintaining their citizenship in another country as well. So be it whatever country it is, I won't name countries.
Yeah. What I'm referring to, Mr. Khan, is more so, do we allow for a two-tier citizenship as opposed to ensuring that there's a consequence, a more direct consequence, equally applied to our citizens. And it could be prison or whatever it might be.
I don't look at it as two-tiered. I look at it as somebody who's an extremist or a terrorist. They've violated Canadian values. Okay. And you will be treated according to the law. And if the law allows us to strip your citizenship, then so be it. It should be.
So I am in agreement with him, and I also think that we have to look at it further. What impact does it have on people who are just getting into this radical mentality? We are reinforcing bad habits. Once we say this is not acceptable, it is not acceptable.
Okay.
So
Okay,
you
thank
lose your citizenship.
Sure. Okay, thank you. Professor, last time the committee met, I did ask questions regarding the whole issue of the number of landed immigrants that are actually members of the forces. I was quite concerned in regards to the minimal number. Again, we're talking over the last decade, maybe in the neighborhood of 40 to 60 individuals recruited. There are many, including myself, that would ultimately argue that this bill will do absolutely nothing in terms of addressing the issue of trying to recruit or see more landed immigrants recruited. Do you find that this is a deficiency within government policy that does not allow for more landed immigrants to become members of the Canadian Forces?
Yeah, so I would say, my stand is still that I support the bill because it is a step in the right direction. But yes, it's a question of policies, but it's a question of also the application of the policy. So the policy is the QRNO, as I stated, but the fact that, so in the QRNO it stated there are exceptions, but these exceptions, A, are not widely advertised. And then even when landed immigrants do apply, there is a big barrier of the security clearance. Why? Because the great majority of our occupations are labeled as high security, level 2. It's a secret level.
Do you think we would have a better forces today if there were more landed immigrants in it?
I would say it would be, the idea is it's not a question of being better. It's a question of opening the door so that everybody has equal opportunity to apply if they are qualified for the job.
Now, you're familiar with what this bill will be extending to members of the forces. Would you think that this would be something that would be practical for RCMP officers or police officers, others outside of the Canadian Forces in terms of for landed immigrants?
I don't know what their recruiting practices are, so I can't speak to that. I can tell you that on the Canadian Forces recruiting site, this is not very well advertised, that permanent residents who are not citizens yet can apply to specific jobs if they have a specific skill set. So I don't know how the RCMP or other local police forces or provincial police advertise.
Thank you, Professor Scopio. Mr. Opitz.
Mr. Chair. Professor, I was just reading some of your material here, and can you describe what you mean by to ensure that organizational culture is conducive to having a diverse membership?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand
It's quoting you, saying, yeah, you said more effort is needed, and quotes, to ensure that organizational culture is conducive to having a diverse membership in the Canadian Forces.
Okay. So when we are opening the door to diversity, it's really key that the organization be ready to not just accept the diversity that it's coming in, whether it's gender or culture, religious or linguistic, but not just accept it, but also embrace it and make it part of the team. So if I have a diverse team, I need to be able to understand their culture as a leader. I need to be able to tap into the diversity that each member brings in. At the end, somebody needs to make a decision, but, and it's a two-way process. Like your colleague before said, when the diverse member comes in, they need to understand that the organization has its own values. So in the Canadian Forces, we value command structure. So if your commanding officer is a female and you are a male, you need to be okay with that, for example.
Yeah, and I would submit that that's already happening in a lot of cases, especially in reserve regiments in particular, because they're in urban centers. And in fact, in my regiment, at one point, we counted 18 different ethnic groups, languages, religions. Everybody was embraced. Everybody was part of the team. In fact, I trained some of the first women for combat, in combat roles. So there was a lot of diversity in particular in those units. I recognized at the time regular force, because of where they were located, things like that would typically lag behind some of that. But I think that a lot of that has been caught up. Wouldn't you agree?
I would say the Canadian Forces has made a lot of progress, and my comments are basically geared towards we need to be more proactive to increase that diversity. So if we're looking at the numbers, since you're bringing up numbers, overall, the total force, if we look at visible minority, is 5%. That does not compare at all to the workforce diversity that we have. If we look at gender diversity, we're talking about 15%. Now, these numbers are not increasing very fast anytime soon unless we take more proactive measures.
And what would you recommend? Because I think the Canadian Forces reaches out very broadly and very aggressively to recruit and attract everybody.
There's a lot of there are a lot of efforts. You're correct. If we look at the advertising, there's they're trying to make sure there's a female, there's a visible minority, there's all kinds of diversity, and these are all great steps. But at the end of the day, it has to go from the attraction, recruiting, retention. It's a process.
But that's for any recruit.
Absolutely.
And you can't force a recruit through the door, no matter who they are. I mean, the military isn't for everybody or every individual. It's a calling.
Absolutely.
You have to be there, and you have to really want to do that. And I don't care where you come from. It's a mindset that you have to be part of. I just want to shift gears a little bit and talk about radicalization of youth in Canada. Do you work on any of that at RMC?
No, this is not my area of expertise. That's why I did not speak to that, sir.
Ah, okay. Do you have any opinions on that, Bill? Oh.
They would just be my personal opinion, not based on my research, so I don't think I would be informing this committee any further than my colleagues.
Okay. I'm good.
You finished?
Yep.
Okay. Still have 3 minutes. Anyone?
Thanks, Chair. One of the, taking the point of Mr. Opitz commenting on, maybe Salma and Asif could comment, the whole idea of radicalization and of youth and what happens, you spoke to it somewhat, Asif, in your opening comments, the trend of convincing young people that radicalization and training to stand up for or defend or promote terrorism is somehow accepted and considered to be an honor. And I wondered, we had the RCMP and CSIS in our last meeting, and a little more difficult for them to give us pertinent details about certain cases. Mr. Lamoureux stated that there were 4 cases that he had understood. We actually heard from them that there are 15 that have happened over the last number of years. And obviously, youth are convinced or conscripted into this, and wondered your thoughts on that and how it impacts the bill.
In regards to if I think radicalization is on the rise, is that the question?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not privy to those CSIS reports, but if they're saying that it's happening and they have findings that it is happening, I would suggest that it's probably a lot more than what they found, because where there's one that you can easily find, there are many that you cannot find. It is prevalent. I wouldn't say that it's radically increasing, but it is prevalent, and it is a concern of the Canadian government to make sure that it's rooted out.
Salma?
Chairperson, I believe what Mr. Deiser is referring to is the amendments that the minister is talking about in terrorists in general, whereas the questioning that I had posed was regarded strictly to the bill of threats against the Canadian forces when I talked about under 5, just so that we're clear on that.
Well, You know, listening to the minister's comments, we're pretty well letting anything go. I mean, the amendments, we haven't seen them yet, but I have the feeling, just listening to his comments, that they're going to be there's going to be fairly broad. So we're letting pretty well anything go. Ms. Sims, did you have?
It's okay.
Mr. Dykstra, you're back on.
I'd like to hear from Salma.
Are you asking if radicalization is on the increase?
Yes.
Again, I definitely think it is, and it's becoming fashionable to see, you know, it's a peer pressure. Definitely it is, and I think if some people are given a clear indicator that's not acceptable, hopefully we will see some changes.
One of the pieces of discussion that comes up on a regular basis is this whole issue of that a dual citizen is the only one who would face the risk of losing their citizenship, Canadian citizenship. It would seem to me that you could actually take this from a different perspective, and that is that the only person who actually can risk losing citizenship or wants to use Canadian citizenship as a vehicle to be able to transfer oneself to another country to train or to commit a terrorist act. And I wondered to get your thoughts on that specifically, that would it not seem more likely that a dual citizen would potentially use their Canadian citizenship to protect themselves and therefore train, and then that would potentially lead to a terrorist act versus someone who only has Canadian citizenship?
Dykstra, so very briefly, just from one of you, because we're over the time.
I say the answer is yes, but let's not just say that dual citizens of other countries can be terrorists. There's people that can be terrorists here too that are born and raised here, so let's not just paint a brush.
Thank you. Madame Gregouet.
Monsieur le Président. Je voudrais tout d'abord.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I'd like to thank our witnesses for being here today. Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, before we go any further with the questioning, I'd like to be able to react to the letter that we received from Trisham Kosha. I'd like to remind members of the committee that our comments can have real consequences for people who see them or hear them. And as members of Parliament, when we talk about immigration, it has consequences. When we talk about radicalization and terrorism in relation to immigration, that can also have consequences. So I think we really have to be careful about what we say, because those consequences, I mean, I could tell you a lot about what those consequences can be. I've seen the real impact that this can have within a society which is no longer united as a result of the comments that can be made and that go too far and cause a reaction on the part of people who don't really know that much about the situation. So as I say, comments in committee can lead to consequences and really cause divisions within society. So I simply wanted to alert all the members of the committee to the need to moderate our comments and to show judgment in terms of what we say and not stigmatize people. And now I'll move on to my questions.
Point of order.
I have no idea what side he's talking about. I'm not sure how it relates to our committee. I have no idea how it relates to the questions that we're asking here. I mean, the speech in the House of Commons is fine, but I'm not sure how this at all relates to what we're talking about this morning.
Rick, Monsieur.
You said it, and we're now going to hear a question.
Ok, c'est bon. Donc.
Okay. So my question is addressed to all of you. We have all seen and witnessed the consequences of what happened in 2001 for the Muslim community. There was a major impact there, and that impact is still being felt today. And for the Muslim community, whatever their passport may be when they're crossing a border, the fact is that they're still stigmatized. And my question is, in your opinion, will this bill of 425 have as significant an impact, and will it prevent acts of terrorism? What is your view on that?
I'm a little confused, but I'll try and answer as much as I possibly can. So 2001 or 9/11 had an impact on everyone. The fact is, yes, the Muslim community was impacted, but we also stood up and said, we're not going to defend what some minority of Muslims have done, okay? So by this bill, I think that it would have a very positive impact in the sense that once people know that disloyalty is not tolerated by anyone, it's not just to the Muslim, it's not based on religion or ethnicity, it is across the board. So the fact is that makes it much more harder for people to buy into it. And, you know, we can talk about many things. We can talk about what happened in security certificates and how it impacted us because everybody said, oh, these people are coming and they're destroying our country. So it's a two-way dialogue, and much more time needed than this. I would love to appear and talk about the experiences that elders have had because of this, because they see their religion being taken and being hijacked. So the impact is not given in 1 minute. Maybe we can be allowed to come again and talk about the impact and how I think this is positive.
Ok, je vais poursuivre avec...
I'd just like to pursue that with a second question. In your answer, there was a word you used that, because you talked about a minority of people, and I think it's important to come back to the idea that this only involves a minority of people. And of course, it's out of the question to try and tar all immigrants with the same brush. Now, we have a real concern with respect to the two levels of citizenship that could be created through this bill.
Your time. Wind up. Go ahead.
Ok.
And also the concerns that this might cause among immigrants. Now, since this bill applies to people who have dual citizenship, and that there are many naturalized Canadians that do have dual citizenship, do you believe that this measure is discriminatory in some way?
I think your question has several answers, if I may say that. Well, first of all, I don't see it as a two-tier, as Asif has said.
We got time for one.
One?
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, then you should have stopped her with due respect, because I'm not going to be able to answer the whole thing.
And I understand that. My problem is to control the time, and we're well over. So
I hope that's not being taken off by 1 minute. So let me answer. So if with due respect, sir.
You've already got a minute, but go ahead.
Thank you so much. Okay. The fact is, if we are talking minority, we don't have to be afraid of anything. And the minority that chooses to do this is doing harm to us too. So the fact is that, as we have said, it's not going to impact because it is a minority doing it. We don't want it to become a majority. And that goes not only in the Muslim community, it goes into every community. We have Sikhs who are into that. We have, you know, Irish, everybody. So it's not a matter of, you know, just the Muslim community, yes. And so.
Thank you. Mr. Lung.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to finish a thought that was brought up earlier by regarding radicalization. You know, the His Holiness Hamad Mazar Masood Ahmad cautioned political leaders in Canada that we should be vigilant in screening out who we let in the country so that we can protect us against entry of extremism. I want to take a look at the other side and, you know, what is it in order for us to understand radicalization, we need to understand from their side, why would they want to perpetuate something like this, terrorist acts and so on against any country? So perhaps you can share with us the thought from what you see as the need for a particular Muslim extremist or group to commit acts of terrorism.
That could take a long time to answer that question, okay. In the sense that there are probably many reasons, but I'll just simply state it as such that the Ahmadi Muslim community really adheres to the concept of the fact that Islam means peace. And unfortunately, and I'm just speaking about Muslims that are creating this havoc, they're not following that concept of what Islam is. And whatever reason it is, those ideologies are setting in, and it's creating hate towards the Western world. But if they were just to go back to the root of Islam, these problems would not be there.
So is there any truth in the fact that there are people who pursued the jihad, the holy war, the antagonisms against the West because of our way of life and so on?
Unfortunately, there are various interpretations that these radicals have taken, and they have ill feelings of the way of life over here, or our foreign policies, or whatever it might be, which is unfortunate. But that isn't the concept again in Islam, and it shouldn't be.
So, if a young person is brought, or who grew up in Canada, or who immigrated in Canada, either born in, say, a Muslim country, come to Canada, how would he, he lives there with the benefits of this country, why would he want to turn against us?
I think you're asking me to give reasons as to why one should hate Canada. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And as an Ahmadi Muslim, brought up and trained as an Ahmadi, I just cannot fathom those reasons. It's just an unfortunate circumstance. It's evil thoughts. It's, for lack of a better word, idiots teaching these people, wrong ideas and ideologies. And when I made those comments that the caution needs to be prior to who we're letting into this country, it's those ideologies that are making themselves prevalent. We need to root that out. We need to make sure that doesn't happen. The whole concept of jihad, one of the things that, as unfortunate as 9/11 was, our definition of jihad, which is not a jihad by the sword, but a jihad by the pen, it's a peaceful jihad. That's been our definition in the Ahmadi Muslim community. We're very grateful that most of the Muslim world is now starting to adopt our definition. And we just hope that it would spread further, and that these extremist camps, wherever they are, should start to understand this point as well.
Now, then let me come back to questions that when the bill was first introduced by MP Shuri, appearing in committee as a witness, he stated that he would be open to amendments to strengthen this bill. What is your suggestion how this bill would be improved?
Again, as I'm not a career bureaucrat. I don't craft bills, but what I would suggest, and as I made my comments and the cautionary comments of His Holiness as well, that just be careful in terms of making sure that we do not ever make this applicable to somebody who's innocent and do something that should create, strife for an individual that is not a bona fide terrorist or extremist. So whatever those provisions are, however bills are crafted, there should be caution, or there should be careful consideration. Sorry.
Is there another comment, say, from Madam Siddiqui, or?
I think that question should be left to the people we have elected and our judiciary. So if there are any amendments, I've heard from Member Shuri that he's open to some, and I will leave it to that because I'm not an expert on that. So.
Thank you. Mr. Weston.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I think there's two things that shouldn't be missed here. Firstly, Mr. Shori sits next to me in the House, and everything good about this bill I'm going to take credit for. The second thing is we've heard some very remarkable statements from you, both Mr. Khan and Ms. Siddiqui, and I've gone a little deeper. I've noticed on your website, the Muslim Canadian Congress says, we believe that fanaticism and extremism within the Muslim community is a major challenge to all of us. We stand opposed to the extremists and will present the more humane and tolerant face of our community. I assume you adopt those comments. And Mr. Khan, you said this morning that your community is against all forms of terrorism and extremism and supports any policy that protects the principle of loyalty to Canada. I think whether we're Christians or Jews or subscribe to any other community in this country, your condemnation of fanaticism, of extremism, is a really powerful statement that I hope will be crowed from the rooftops and is a wonderful consequence of my colleague Mr. Shory's introducing this bill to have this commentary. I wonder if you could just comment how deeply held this conviction is in each of your communities.
Go first.
Well, just actually recently, 2 days ago, we held a peace conference in London, United Kingdom, where His Holiness made an address speaking to these points, and the newly appointed ambassador for religious freedom, Andrew Bennett, was actually present and made a comment there as well. We are continually doing events such as this. We do interfaith symposiums in Canada, and we've conducted about 200 or 300 of them across the country. Many of the topics are always along the lines of, how to generate peace within society, how to eradicate extremism, measures for world peace. And, we will always speak for this, and we will never stop. And we hope that, we will have world peace one day.
So what you have read is what we are standing with, and we are speaking out. It's not a large group like the Ahmadiyya, but the fact is our message is resonating. And we get a lot of opposition, and I would like to take this opportunity to ask both sides to look at what we are doing as Muslim Canadian Congress, a small group, but a group which has got a voice. And please, let's look at nonpartisan support. Let's not look at political correctness the way we have come to know today, because it only impacts people who want peace. Because one group goes and talks to some so-called leaders, and they get reinforced in wrong habits. Like, for example, this conference that took place in Toronto, where I may say that Prime Minister Harper's message went, and Justin Trudeau actually appeared as a keynote speaker. Let's look at where we are going, not just for political correctness, that we are there for everybody. And we're looking for help from the politicians, so keep your doors open to us, please.
Merci bien pour vos commentaires. Est-ce que je peux...
Thank you very much for your comments. Could I ask the question again? Is there anything else that you can recommend or something else that we should do with this bill that would foster loyalty to Canadian citizenship? Is there anything else we can do with the oath of citizenship that people take when people become citizens of Canada, or something else? Mr. Khan.
I don't think that, again, the majority of people that are coming to this country are loyal to the country, and Canada is doing a wonderful job of promoting that. And I think it just speaks to the fact that everybody that could possibly apply and become a Canadian citizen from different parts of the world would love to do so. So I don't think that we have any issues where we're lacking in promoting these concepts of loyalty to the country. Unfortunately, it's just some prevailing forces on the other side that are creating the issue. And I don't think there's anything more that we can do to the oath or anything else that will attack those ideologies.
Ms. Sitzabis, and you have the final word.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank all of the witnesses for being here. Professor Scopio, you were talking about the impact or the effect on the Canadian Armed Forces, and that it would be such a little number of people who are impacted by this bill. And Mr. Shorey, when he introduced it, said that it was to try and accomplish a state of being able to increase diversity within our Canadian forces. So, and you mentioned that it probably won't really accomplish because of the statistics that we got from the officials from the forces last week that said about 15 people a year. So do you think that if this bill were to be enacted, that the Canadian forces could actually end up creating positions that are specifically for permanent residents and like targeting
Point of order, I'm
permanent
sorry, stop the clock. Point of order.
I just heard the member opposite say that my colleague Devendra Shorey had said something about the intent of this bill, and I actually don't recall him saying that the purpose was that. So I'm not sure. I'm just raising that now because I mean, I'm sitting here and I don't recall that being said. So thank you.
I have no idea. Proceed.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just quoting the quote that you had quoted today. So my question, again, in case you missed it, was do you think that the Canadian Forces could actually end up creating positions that are specifically for permanent residents, so targeting permanent residents in the creation of new positions within the Canadian Forces to accomplish some of the goals here?
As I said, what Mr. Shorey said was actually, I listened to the recording, it was the bill would provide new Canadians with more pathways to integration, to be fair to his speech. To answer your question, I can't speak on behalf of the department, but I'm not aware of positions being created for any specific group. Okay, and in fact, if we go to the intent of the Employment Equity Act is not to have targets and not to, so it's very different from affirmative action, which would be something like what you're talking about. There's no quotas to fulfill. There are goals, so we as an organization strive to achieve those goals, but there are no quotas to achieve.
Okay. Jenny, do you want the rest of the time?
I'm going to, well, I have one more thing to do, so I'm going to stop the questions for now. And I want to thank all the witnesses for coming. You've made a good contribution to our deliberations on this bill, and we thank you for your thoughts and insight. And the witnesses are excused, although just a brief thing for the brief matter for the committee to consider. I've alerted the two critics and the parliamentary secretary. As you know, we changed our schedule for April 18th, which resulted in starting the clause by clause on Tuesday, April 23rd. So therefore, we need to change the motion that we made some time ago that outlined the deadline to submit amendments in order to reflect that change. The motion that I'm suggesting, which I'd like someone to make, that amendments to the bill be submitted to the clerk in both official languages 48 hours before the beginning clause-by-clause consideration, that is before 3:30 p.m. on Friday, April 19th, 2013, and that these amendments be distributed to the members in both official languages as soon as possible on Monday, April 22nd, 2013. Do I have a mover for that motion? Mr. Dijkstra. Discussion. All those in favor? That motion carries, and this meeting is adjourned. Okay, we're going to reconvene, and I thank you for not listening to me when I adjourned instead of suspended, but I'm glad you all know what's going on in this committee. So our second witness for the day is, we're just going for 45 minutes on this witness. We're honored to have you here, sir. Mr. Furio de Angelis, who is the representative in Canada from the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. And with him is an Associate Legal Officer, Nadia Williamson. Welcome to both of you. Thank you. Mr. de Angelis, you have up to 8 minutes to make a presentation. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tilson. Monsieur le Président, honorable...
Mr. Chairman, honorable committee members, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, I would like to thank you for inviting me to participate in the debate on Bill C-425, an act to amend the Citizenship Act. We are pleased to have the opportunity to talk to the committee about this bill, since it is about statelessness. Before I start, however, I would like to introduce to you the mandate of our office when it comes to statelessness. The responsibilities of my office towards stateless people started with refugees without any nationality. Under the statute of our office and the Convention of 1951 on the status of refugees.
1954 Convention relating to the status of stateless person and the 1961 Convention on the reduction of statelessness, UNHCR mandate responsibility concerning statelessness were expanded. General Assembly resolution in 1974 and 76 designed UNHCR as the body mandated to examine the cases of persons who claim the benefit of the 1961 Convention and to assist such persons in presenting their claims to the appropriate national authorities. Subsequently, again, the United Nations General Assembly Resolution 1995 and subsequent resolutions confer upon UNHCR a global mandate for the identification, prevention and reduction of statelessness and for the international protection of stateless persons. So UNHCR's stateless mandate includes prevention of statelessness. As a result, it is not limited to addressing cases of statelessness which have already occurred. This means that UNHCR works to identify and address risks of statelessness, which may arise as a result of gap in nationality laws and conflict of laws between states, administrative obstacles such as onerous requirements for proof of nationality, situation of state succession, and discrimination on race, gender, disability, and other grounds. So it is in relation to this intersection between prevention of statelessness and citizenship and the Office responsibilities in respect to the 1961 Convention that UNHCR welcomes the opportunity to present to you one specific comment on Bill C-425. And please allow me to clarify again from the outset that UNHCR can only comment on elements of the bill which relate to statelessness. I will therefore avoid referring to questions on withdrawal of the Canadian citizenship for individuals who possess dual or multiple nationalities, as in principle statelessness is not an issue in such cases. So, with respect to Bill C-425, Clause 2 of the bill amending Section 9 of the Citizenship Act provides for withdrawal of the Canadian citizenship as follows. A Canadian citizen who is also a citizen or a legal resident of a country other than Canada is deemed to have made an application for renunciation of their Canadian citizenship if they engage in an act of war against the Canadian Armed Forces. In this respect, UNHCR would like to submit that the possible withdrawal of citizenship of a Canadian national who is also a legal resident of a country other than Canada is at odds with the provision of Articles 7 and 8 of the 1961 Convention, requiring contracting states not to permit renunciation or provide for loss of nationality, Article 7, or deprivation of nationality, Article 8, where the individual concerned would be rendered stateless. In this respect, I wish to state from the outset UNHCR's acknowledgement and appreciation for the Minister's comment before this committee that since Canada is a party to the 1961 Convention on the Reduction of Statelessness, the bill needs to be amended in order to ensure Canada follows its international obligation. The Minister stated that, as written, the bill would apply to citizens who are legal residents of another country and should then not have dual nationality. It would render them stateless. The Minister urged the committee to consider amendments so that only those with dual citizenship would have their citizenship renounced in order to ensure that no one is made stateless. So UNHCR fully concurs with this position and highlights that this is the only section of the bill that, if not amended, would be inconsistent with Canada's obligation under the 61 Convention. Therefore, UNHCR respectfully recommends that the words or illegal residents be deleted from the text. I would like to add a few words on the renunciation, loss, and deprivation of nationality in accordance to the 1961 Convention. As the 1961 Convention prohibits renunciation, loss, and deprivation of nationality when this results in statelessness. There are exceptions to this general rule, as foreseen in Article 7 with regard to loss of nationality and Article 8 with regard to deprivation of nationality. These exceptions are not applicable to Bill C-425. The exceptions are narrowly defined. With respect to loss of nationality, the only exceptions to the general rule are in relation to prolonged residence abroad by naturalized citizens and failure to register for individuals born outside the territory. With respect to deprivation, the exceptions to the general rule relate essentially to nationality acquired by misrepresentation or fraud and conduct which is inconsistent with the duty of loyalty towards the state. However, this latter set of exceptions to the general rule prohibiting deprivation of nationality resulting in statelessness may be applied only by those states which made a declaration at the time of signature, ratification of accession, that they retain the right to apply them. Canada did not make such a declaration upon accession in 1978, accession to the 1961 Convention. The Convention also requires that these grounds needed to exist in national law at the time that the declaration was made. Canada, together with the UK, put forward the drafting for these elements of Article 8 of the Convention when the text of the 1961 Convention was negotiated. International human rights law foresees differences in treatment depending on specific circumstances of different groups of people. This approach can be summed up with the axiom that people in the same situation must be treated the same. People in different situations may be treated differently. However, there must be a legitimate reason for a difference in treatment. In support of this principle, the United Nations Human Rights Committee states that the enjoyment of rights and freedoms on an equal footing, however, does not mean identical treatment in every instance. And this is paragraph 8 of General Comments 18, Human Rights Committee, 1989. It is necessary that the Citizenship Act differentiates between the impact of specific elements of the Citizenship Act on people who have another nationality and on those who do not. The former are left without the protection of another state, while the latter are stateless. The difference in treatment, therefore, serves a legitimate purpose, which is the prevention of statelessness. So, on this, Chairman Tilson, honourable committee members, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your attention.
Your Excellency, thank you very much for your remarks. And I think you were here for Bill C-31, and we thank you for that too. And as you know, members of the committee will now have some questions for you, and perhaps Ms. Williamson as well. We have Mr. Meningakis is first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Your Excellency, for your presentation and for appearing before us this morning. We know that a Canadian citizen can have their citizenship taken away if they obtained it fraudulently. And almost all of our peer countries have the ability to strip citizenship for reasons such as treason, terrorism, among other things. Yet critics of this bill claim that Canadian citizenship is an unalienable right. How do you respond to that?
Okay. As I expressed, there is a general rule which is the basis of the 1961 Convention. I remind that 1961 Convention on the reduction of statelessness, the general rule is that no action of the states should render a person stateless. No action in terms of accepting renunciation, when we think that when we allow persons to renounce citizenship, or revocation of citizenship. There are two different articles in the 1961 Convention. Article 7, which deals with renunciation by the individual. Article 8, which deals with revocation of citizenship, that means it's an act of the authority. In both situations, this cannot happen if that action renders the person stateless. There are exceptions, as I said. There are exceptions to this general principle on both articles. On Article 7 with respect to renunciation, and on Article 8 with respect to revocation. And certain exceptions are linked to the concept of loyalty to the state. But as I said, unfortunately, there is, unfortunately in this context, there was a declaration that had to be made at the time of accession to the 1961 Convention on the basis of Article 8.3 of the same convention, which at that moment of accession in 1978, Canada did not make.
But this bill is specifically addressing people with dual citizenship, so in effect, no one is going to be deemed stateless. They will have another country with another nationality. We're talking about people with dual citizenship in the context of this bill. Do you believe that citizenship should never be taken away, regardless of how violent or disloyal one's actions are? Is that part of the UNHCR policy?
Sir, with respect to your first part of the question, I am referring to the section of the clause, as I said, clause 2, which says that a Canadian citizen who is also a citizen or a legal resident. So our only recommendation is that this word, or a legal residence, that means that if someone is a legal if someone is a Canadian citizen and a legal resident of another country, that means it's not a dual
I think
national.
the context of the bill means if they're a permanent resident of this country, not of another country. No. I think that's the context of the bill, and perhaps that can be clarified. Well, let me go on with my questioning. Both the minister and the sponsor of this bill, MP Devinder Shori, acknowledge that there's no internationally acceptable definition for the term acts of war. However, when officials from the Department of National Defense appeared before this committee, they stated that armed conflict may be a more appropriate term. What is the UNHCR definition of armed conflict?
No, well, there is in UNHCR there is not definition of armed conflict. You know, UNHCR is the organization which deals with the humanitarian consequence of refugee situations, and in this particular case has also a specific mandate for the prevention and reduction of statelessness. There are other instruments, there are other conventions, there are other institutions in international law which deals with the issues of war, and there are definitions of war crimes in the international statute of the criminal court, but these are areas that do not pertain to the mandate of UNHCR. In this particular respect is the mandate on the prevention and reduction of statelessness, and there is a specific element in the bill which deals with the possibility, the risk of creating statelessness, and this is what I'm trying to address here today with you.
So would you have, I'm not sure you would, but would you have any suggestion on how our committee here could draft an amendment that would more clearly define what that meant?
Well, as I put it in my recommendation, I think that to make this bill consistent with the provision of the 1961 Convention, deleting the words "or a legal residence" would probably be enough, because that is the part which impact on the risks of creating statelessness.
We've heard from witnesses that acts of war is not clearly defined in domestic or international law. So when Minister Jason Kenney appeared before our committee, he recommended the committee amend the bill to include acts that are more commonly defined in law. He suggested terrorism, high treason, and those who serve as member of a country's armed forces that is engaged in an armed conflict with Canada be added as grounds for deemed renunciation of one's citizenship. Would you agree with that?
Well, I don't think UNHCR has really a say with respect to what to add or in the definition of crimes. What is our concern is that whatever is the reasons for revoking citizenship, that be done in compliance with the obligations under the 61 Convention, which requires that those acts then would not render persons stateless.
Yeah, when the minister appeared before us, he was pretty clear that it is not our intention and we to in any way contravene Canada's commitment to the 1961 Convention, for sure. Nor is it our intention to render people stateless. I mean, those people that do not have another state to go to will simply be tried and put and spend their time in a Canadian prison. That's not the intention of this bill. The intention of this bill is to clearly add another dimension, if you will, to those people that are dual citizens.
Thank you, Mr. Menegakis. Ms. Sitza, please.
Thank you again for appearing before this committee. As you've raised also, there are others who have raised the concern that this bill, as in its current form as it's written, as it could apply to a person who is a legal resident, but not a citizen of a country, thus creating a situation of possible statelessness. First, while I don't believe it's clear or that we have a clear understanding of the definition of a legal resident, can you share some of your thoughts on the ramifications of applying this bill to someone who is a legal resident of another country but not a citizen?
Okay. Well, that's why we say citizenship is a very important, as we call it, the rights to have rights, is a very important bond which, of course, links the individual with the states. When someone is citizen, has the protection of the state. If you are a legal resident, you are not a citizen by definition. That means, as I said, the Canadian citizen who is also a legal resident of another country cannot invoke from that other country the protection of the state. So had that person to lose citizenship because of the acts included in this bill, would remain a stateless person, legal resident in another country. Legal residency cannot be equated to citizenship, because we know that citizenship is the strongest and the unique bond of rights and duties which link individuals to the state.
Thank you for some of that clarification. So the amendment that you suggested, as the committee goes through its process, if that amendment is not accepted or isn't actually, if the bill is not changed, then the same ramifications will exist.
Yes, correct.
Okay, thank you. So there are concerns for individuals, child soldiers, for example, who may have dual citizenship in Canada, who will be caught under this bill, yet have been compelled into a so-called act of war as defined by the bill, or armed conflict, as others have mentioned, is a better term to use. When the minister visited us last week, he said that the minister would retain discretion not to pursue an application for deemed renunciation, and I quote, for an individual who is compelled to do something against their own volition, end quote. Is relying on ministerial discretion enough to protect children with dual citizenship who may be caught up in this bill?
Well, we see in many other institutions with respect to rights that children's rights are particularly important and they have to be protected in a special way. We know in the determination of refugee status how important are special procedures that have to be applied to when interviewing children. We know even in the difficult context of exclusion with respect to refugee status procedures, how, for instance, issues of duress, issues of child soldiers and children have to be seen under a particular light. There are specific and expertise procedures that have to be applied. So surely when we deal with respect to children's rights, special procedures have to be applied because different situations may be at stake, and especially with respect to duress and coercion, this is a reality whenever we deal with children's rights.
So if I may extrapolate a little bit from your comment, ministerial discretion alone is not enough and we need to have experts involved. Is that what you're saying? I don't want to put words in your mouth, so I'd rather it come out of your own mouth.
Well, we'll have to see how that is worded in the bill, but definitely I would say that is important that when children's rights are at stake, there might be special procedures and there might be expertise that has to be put in the context of that evaluation.
Do you have some actual recommendations that you can make to this committee, maybe, to this effect?
Well, probably not at this stage, but definitely we can be for sure of service and resources if need be upon specific request.
Okay, fabulous. And if you think of anything, you please do send it in writing to the clerk and the chair of the committee.
All right. Thank you.
Because that's what this stage of the committee is about, is to actually look at the bill and see how we, as parliamentarians, we have the fiduciary duty to Canadians and citizens and non-citizens, I guess, alike, to make sure that we are making the best laws and making the best policy moving forward. So your expertise would be very much welcome. So thank you. The minister indicated that in principle he's in favor for Bill 425 to apply to Canadians without dual citizenship, but is legally bound by the UN Convention on the Reduction of Statelessness, to which Canada is a signatory. Of course, you mentioned this time and time again. I am uncertain. Well, we all have a clear understanding of the issue of statelessness. Can you share with us the importance of not being stateless and some of its consequences for people who are stateless?
As I said before, we consider citizenship is the fundamental right of persons. Is it been described as the right to have rights? Because without citizenship, all sorts of other rights cannot be accessed. We see the situation of statelessness in the world is still very serious. There is an estimation of 12 million stateless persons in the world. This is only an estimation by UNHCR. In the recent years, UNHCR have done activities together with countries trying to identify and register. Up to now, together with the support of countries, 3.5 million of stateless persons have been registered, although, of course, the estimation of stateless is larger. Living a life of stateless is a life at the margin of the society. This is particularly true with respect when people try to access rights, like having identity documents, registering for schools, registering for social rights. At that moment, situations come up that stateless persons cannot enjoy basic rights. This is something that is surely something that countries should look forward to solve at the global level. We believe that this is not impossible. We are living in an area in which actually nationalities is very important. National principles are very strong. So in a sense, the existence of stateless is a bit at odds with a world which is defined by the existence of states.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Lamoureux.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, Bill C-425 initially will, in fact, as you have correctly pointed out, Mr. De Langelos, that at the end of the day, if it was to pass as it is, that it would cause potential statelessness. Now, the government, thankfully, because of the UN Declaration of 1961, recognizes that this would not be a good thing. So now the minister comes forward, I suggested to hijack the bill of Mr. Shory's, and says, well, what we'll do is we're going to establish two classes of citizenship. Those that have dual citizens will, in fact, be stripped of their Canadian citizenship, and those that don't have dual citizens will have to look at the internal justice system. And my first question to you is, first, do you, and I realize you want to more so talk about the issue of statelessness, and you've pointed out an amendment to Mr. Shory's bill that would deal with that, but do you have any comment on the issue of the establishment of two classes of citizenship?
I wouldn't say that, no, I wouldn't have a comment directly in that relation. My comment was related to the prevention of statelessness, as you address it correctly. As I said, there is a situation in which in international human rights, there are situations that the law foresees differences in treatment depending on specific circumstances of different groups of people. So, as I said, people in the same situation must be treated the same. People in different situations may be treated differently. With respect to statelessness, it's important that any citizenship law understands that there is a different impact. If you withdraw citizenship from someone who has dual national, and if you withdraw citizenship from someone who is only one nationality, the impact is very different. And that we want to prevent. We want to prevent that impact results in statelessness.
Right. But you would see them as two totally different issues, Mr. Shory's bill, and then the creation of the denunciation of citizenship for those individuals that would have dual citizens. And I guess maybe I'd be asking you to speculate a bit here, but when you deal with the issue of taking away one's citizenship, do you see this as a major issue in which there needs to be good public debate on as an issue?
Well, taking away citizenship from someone who has only one, yes, is a big issue because it results in statelessness. And if those situations do not fall under the exceptions which are foreseen in the Convention, as I said, Article 7 and 8, then this results in statelessness. And therefore, that's the issue that we want to prevent.
Right.
There are exceptions, as I said, to that respect. However, those exceptions are not applicable to this bill.
Right. See, with the private member's bill, you know, it passes within 4 hours of debate, the entire process, limited number of speakers, individuals such as yourself that will be invited to a committee. And I'm wondering to what degree there's an obligation, given, you know, that the minister has brought in something potentially totally new, and that's what a lot of the discussion has been about in terms of establishing a second-class citizenship, if in fact there would be a better way to be able to address the broader issue by allowing for a more thorough debate on the issue before a decision is made. Would that be advice that you would provide? Or
no, I would not really comment on this because that's not really impact on my concern here. which is the concern of making of contributing to your work of creating a bill which does not result in statelessness.
Okay. I can appreciate the sensitivity and why you wouldn't comment on it, but you can't blame me for asking the question. At the end of the day, individuals back in 1961, when the convention was made, I'm not sure if you gave a precise definition of exactly what the statement was. Do you have that at hand?
The statement of?
The United Nations back in 1961 reference statelessness.
Well, I have the convention here in front of me, and as I said, the articles which pertains to this discussion are Articles 7 and 8. More importantly, probably Article 8, which deals with revocation from the state of citizenship, because in Article 8 there are certain exceptions, as I said, which are specifically motivated by fraud, misrepresentation, but also acts against the loyalty to the state.
Thank you.
So,
Mr. Weston.
Thanks, Chair. How much time?
I have 7 minutes.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for coming, Mr. DeAngelis, and for your work to help people who are in dire straits throughout the world. First, I'd just like to address what my colleague, Mr. Lamoureux, has brought up on several occasions, the creating of two classes. He does that to derogate from the quality of the bill. But I would just point out that in most cases, laws will affect people differently. The main aspect or the inherent intention of Mr. Shori's bill is not to create different classes of people, but to make clear that citizenship is conditional, and the condition in this case is that you not commit acts of war against the people who share the citizenship that you've been given. So that leads to my first point. Our minister has recommended that the committee include an amendment that ensures no one will be left stateless. We've heard this now several times in this hearing. I just want to get it on the record and really categorically clear that you support such an amendment, given that it will ensure that we don't end up causing the problem that you're most concerned about.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, I said it from the outset that we support, acknowledge, and appreciate the minister's comment with respect to putting an amendment to this bill, which would avoid the risk of statelessness. And so I've also indicated in my recommendation that removing the word legal residence would do that. Removing the word legal residence from the text of the bill would avoid the risk of creating statelessness.
Okay. And Mr. DeAngelis, I'm going to, in a moment, refer to provisions in the laws of Britain, Switzerland, Australia, and the United States, all of which have provisions by which they can strip citizenship. Before I refer to those provisions, isn't it true that Canada is virtually alone among our peer countries in not having the means to strip citizenship for reasons such as terrorism or treason?
As I said, in Article 8 of the Convention, there is the possibility for a state to revoke citizenship on the basis of acts which are impacting of the loyalty to the state. That exception is not applicable to the bill because Canada did not make the declaration at the time of accession to the 1961 Convention. Canada did not make that declaration, that Canada would apply, would use those exceptions. Countries did it. Austria, France, but UK, you mentioned UK, New Zealand made that declaration, and they can use the exception of Article 8 of the 1961 Convention. But the absence of that declaration in 1978 by Canada does not allow Canada to use the exception provided for in Article 8 of the 1961 Convention.
Okay, I don't know if we have a disagreement here or not, but let me just refer to the provisions. Firstly, Britain, which allows the country to strip citizenship if it's deemed to be, quote, conducive to the public good. In Switzerland, you can strip citizenship if the person has acted in a way that causes serious prejudice to the national interest of the country. In Australia, the government may strip citizenship if it would be contrary to public interest if an individual remained a citizen. And in the United States, citizenship can be stripped or revocation can be imposed for high treason or for someone being a member of an armed forces at war with the United States. Now, I'm not sure whether I would agree or Minister of Justice would agree with the interpretation you're making on the consequence of that declaration. But putting that aside for just a minute, do you think that these are the types of inspirations or precedents that we should be examining as we look at the wisdom of enacting the bill proposed by Mr. Shorey?
Well, with respect to the technicalities of different countries, of course, it would be very difficult for me to enter each of them. I can surely support the work of this committee by sending some materials later on with respect to certain countries, and especially countries that you have mentioned, the UK, New Zealand, Australia. USA is not party to the 1961 Convention with respect to these issues. And this can be given. We can forward this documentation later on to you, this information. In general, what I wanted to say is that there should be safeguard and provisions. There should be safeguard and provisions in citizenship acts, in nationality laws that allow revocation of citizenship in accordance to the existing provisions of the conventions to which countries are party. And so every nationality law and every citizenship act should be seen in that respect.
Okay. All right.
I'm good to go if you want.
All right. I'm going to turn over to my colleague, Mr. Opitz.
You got less than 30 seconds.
Oh. All right. Then, sir, are you aware that Canada resettles in the G20 most 1 out of 10 refugees in the world?
Absolutely, we are part of that exercise.
All right. Well, would you then not agree that we go a great length to try to create a state for many people that might be stateless as refugees?
Refugees are not stateless. Most majority are not. Some stateless persons may be refugees, and in that case, a stateless person applies for refugee status, is recognized as a refugee.
Understood.
Thank you. Ms. Freeman.
Thank you, Chair, and I want to thank our witnesses for being here. And speaking about the importance of assuring that we do not create stateless people, I think you did very well explain the consequences of the practical consequences of having stateless persons. I have a couple of, and I think it is actually very important to point out the fact that we would be doing that by leaving the legal resident status in this bill. So I have a question. Could we revoke, if we were to revoke a person's citizenship because they committed an act of war against us, and one of our allies who also has this policy or this law that they will revoke citizenship, let's say the UK. If we were to both do so, does that then create a stateless person, or is there some kind of means of stopping that situation from occurring? I don't know if I'm being clear.
Well,
a person who is a dual citizen
every country applies its own citizenship and nationality laws, probably in isolation. I don't know if there are discussions among countries. That's maybe possible. But for UNHCR, as I said, the basic principle is that acts do not result in statelessness. I don't know how to comment more on that.
I don't know if I was clear. I'm sort of it's just so hypothetical, obviously, because a lot of parts of this bill are very hypothetical at this stage. But if for instance I were a Canadian and British, and both these countries can remove citizenships, and I commit an act of war against these allies, essentially, who we often fight alongside Britain. So in that case, there could be a stateless person.
Yes. Well, who would be the first? That's I would not have a comment. In the case you'd say, who would be the first of the two countries to revoke?
Okay.
I don't think I have an answer to that.
It seems like a very, very strange situation to be putting ourselves in. I mean, could a person be stateless and remain in Canada if they were here?
Stateless persons do remain in Canada. There are situations that actually our office is working together with the department, with the Citizenship Immigration Canada. We are working with the government to try to find solution to persons who are stateless and they remain in Canada. They have come in Canada through the refugee program. They have not been recognized as a refugee, and so they remain in Canada as failed asylum seekers, failed refugees, but then, of course, they cannot be removed.
Right.
Because, of course, there is no place where to remove them. So actually, we, as part of the 1961 mandate obligations, UNHCR is contacting the government to try to find a solution, because these are people without rights in Canada, at the margin of the society, cannot be removed. And so this is exactly the work on prevention of statelessness that we are doing together with the government. Thank you,
sir. Thank you, Your Excellency, Ms. Williamson. I'm afraid our time has expired, and on behalf of the committee, I would like to thank you for attending before us today and giving your comments. We appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. I will be correct this time. This meeting is adjourned.